Good evening, aviators. Happy Sunday. I hope you are all doing well. Welcome back to another podcast. It has officially been a long time doing these. I have skipped a few weeks here and there, and I do apologize for that. However, I thoroughly enjoy documenting my journey in such a way as these podcasts, and I will continue to do so because I have gotten so much feedback, and that feedback has been extremely positive. So here we go, another week. So this week I just kind of wanted to answer some random aviation questions that I feel are very important. I know a lot of these are about aviation. That's really what my channel is solely about. And some people want kind of a more diverse amount of content. But I felt as if this week was appropriate to address a few important aviation questions that have come up recently with my aviation curriculum, with some of my classes, with my flight lab. These are questions that are super important that I really need to get a message out there about. So the first question is going to take a while to answer because there's a lot of explanation and logic behind it. So first things first, aeronautical decision making. What is it, and how can we become better pilots based off aeronautical decision making? So ADM, they abbreviate it to ADM, but aeronautical decision making is essentially a process or a performance of obviously making decisions related to flight, related to pre-flight. And so really it's the logic that goes behind the flight play-by-play. That's the best way I can kind of describe this without going into too much detail, like what I'm about to do. So here's a scenario, and a lot of times DPEs or stage checks or just it'll randomly pop up because we are all faced with tough life decisions just like everybody else. So here's a scenario. You're going for a VFR cross country, visual flight rules, cross country from St. George, Utah, all the way up to Salt Lake City International Airport. The weather is forecasted to be VFR, and everything seems like it would go well. However, halfway through the flight, some random thunderstorm pops up. So essentially my scenario is just something I randomly just created in my head within 5 milliseconds, but there is a lot of decision making that goes into the outcome of that flight. So, like the pilot, for example, they might call up air traffic control and seek help, or they might just divert to their nearest airport, in which I personally would just divert to my nearest airport. So, for example, if I made it to Nephi, I would just divert to Nephi and not proceed until that thunderstorm has for sure gone away. Especially since, even though I'm in my IFR, Instrument Flight Rules, flight lab, I still do not want to see any pilot going into a thunderstorm or circumnavigating it with closer than 20 nautical miles. Please stay away from thunderstorms, pilots. Just don't even test it. And there's been plenty of instances where planes have hit horrible updrafts and downdrafts, and things have been completely destroyed. But why I wanted to talk about aeronautical decision making is because it's key to becoming a better pilot. And it's great in flight training to practice good aeronautical decision-making skills because you're with another pilot, you're with a flight instructor, you're with a CFII. And me personally, going throughout my training, I've always loved to ask for suggestions here and there on what I could do better on my flights. What could I change? Because as a pilot, you, no matter if you're Part 91, Part 135, 121, you name it, 141 with my flight school, it does not matter. As long as you are a pilot, you want to be operating as safely and carefully as you can. Now, not a lot of people know this about me, but I kind of have a little bit of a hobby or an interest of watching airplane disaster videos. Now, that sounds absolutely horrible in some people's opinions. Some people may think of that as a morbid hobby, a morbid thought to have. But I truly believe that every single pilot should be investing their time to watch those shows. While you're studying, listen to them. While you have free time, listen to the disaster videos, because they will teach you a lesson on what those pilots may have done wrong or what they did really good at. For example, I can't remember the flight specifically. I believe it was a United Airlines flight, and a whole bunch of things were happening. Everything was going south. They had an engine out, but the crew practiced good communication and good crew resource management. And both of those things resulted in everybody living, despite the engine being out and an emergency landing being made. Now, another great example is the movie Sully. That movie is about Chesley Sullenberger. He is very famous now for the Miracle on the Hudson. So, he landed a plane on the Hudson River. Absolutely insane. People hated him for what he did, but they didn't realize that if he would have diverted like the original plan to the other airport, or if he would have considered turning back, he would have lost all performance and it would have ended up what we call the turn of death. So his good aeronautical decision making saved everybody on board that plane that day, and they were able to live and tell their story to the world. So as a pilot, one of the first things I remember in private pilot ground school was the definite encouragement from all of my instructors, no matter who it was, saying, as long as you're practicing good safety measures, you're making good decisions, and you are complying with the law, you will be safe. And now then again, a safe pilot is an alive pilot. Might we make that clear? Which leads me to my next point. In my aviation safety class, I love that class because we do talk a lot about these air disasters and things that happened, NTSB investigations and things like that. It's an awesome class. But today I was just able to write a 3-page essay about how pilots get distracted. And so this is another question that I wanted to answer that nobody asks, and it's how do you mitigate distractions in the cockpit? But first, I must start with outside the cockpit, because in reality, your flight begins way before flight time starts. Your flight begins way before even you consider taking off. Your plane is off, the engine's off, the batteries are off, and you're doing your pre-flight action to help mitigate those risks. Now let me add a good point that I think is important here, and this is, I really want to make this a lesson, like more of a lesson, not a podcast. I want to make this a lesson to really everybody in aviation, no matter if it's a pilot, a mechanic, a flight attendant, it's so easy to get distracted. So being conscious of your actions and how they affect the future is detrimental to the success of you, your career, and the other people around you, whether that be pilots, passengers, crew, or residences of a local area. Because in the long run, you want to mitigate risk, and let's make it clear that there is a difference between mitigating and stopping. If you are able to mitigate a risk, you are probably able to stop it. But I need to add a point that stopping or halting all risk from happening is nearly impossible. However, as a pilot, you can do enough pre-flight preparation, study beforehand, and get ready at least a day before, especially if you know the flight is happening, and just taking into consideration your NW craft acronym prior to takeoff. Make sure you're checking your NOTAMs, you're aware of the airspace, you're aware of runway information, your takeoff landing distance information, anything associated with an alternate, which becomes of utmost importance in IFR. Now, I wanted to touch on this topic because distractions are so easy. So if you are creating an effective pre-flight, you are not busy pre-flight planning while you're in the aircraft. If you did adequate pre-flight planning, you should be all set to go. So next up, distractions during pre-flights. You've entered the stage of actual real pre-flighting the aircraft instead of pre-flighting yourself. So this time around, there's a lot of distractions that can happen, such as maybe forgetting to put the flaps down. I know that before takeoff or before taxi, before takeoff, those are really important, and make sure you set your flaps to the correct degree that they need to be at for takeoff. Make sure you're complying with that checklist. And it's super easy to lose your spot, so make sure you take your finger and point as you go down the checklist. So while you're in the cockpit, make sure before you take off, you have everything set to where you need it to be set. Make sure you have your plates downloaded. If you're IFR, make sure you have your maps all set out. Make sure you have everything just briefed, cleared, filed, whatever you need to be doing, and then take off. So proceeding to the flight portion is where a lot of distractions can happen, and that's where your pre-flight planning comes in perfect, because if you did an adequate pre-flight, then you should be all set to go for the flight portion. But make sure, as a pilot, that you are doing effective crew resource management and just literally enjoying the flight. Don't stress too much. But these two things go hand in hand with one another, and I have recently been exploring the world of aviation more, and as I go deeper and deeper into my instrument training, it's become more evident that everything that encompasses a flight is so important. And the worst part of a flight for me is pre-flight planning, because it's just so boring and it's so long. However, it does indeed save lives. So I'm going to answer a couple of extra questions just about flying that I have been asked. And it is, what is your favorite part of flying? So obviously it's not pre-flight planning. Out of everything, I would definitely say takeoff and landing. Takeoff and landing is the most rewarding part of a flight takeoff is just so much freedom, and landing is kind of a release of a lot of pressure. Um, Landing is the most stressful part, in my opinion, just because everything just has to be so precise and lined up, and you're monitoring the system a little bit more. And if you're VFR, it can be kind of a challenge though. But I think landing with IFR is a little bit more challenging just because there's so much going on and there's so many numbers and step down altitudes and glide slope and all of this stuff that can seem mumbo jumbo, quote unquote, to most people. But I find it so rewarding and so pleasing the more and more that I fly. Okay, another question. Does flying ever get boring? Does it ever get old? Do you ever want to quit? So, yes, I do admit that there has been a couple of times now that I've thought, oh no, what did I get myself into? And I have wanted to quit. But the issue was not because of me. It was because of a couple of extra factors that is way in the past now. But anyways, so I have actually told myself, no, you are not quitting no matter what happens. And have I quit yet? No. And will I quit? No. The reason being is because this is really my only dream. This is the only thing I see myself doing. And if I quit, I would be breaking my heart as well as the hearts of thousands of other people that I know that follow me and that I know in person. So I have so many things that I like to do that keeps me going with this flying, because it does get challenging. It gets tough, and honestly, it's not always fun all the time, especially just because of the study load and all of these tests. But in the long run, I always have to remember what it felt like to get in an airplane for the first time. And I have to remember what it felt like to get in the airplane for the first time by myself, go on a solo cross country. You know, I have to remember the freedom that I feel, that I get when the wheels leave the ground. Because honestly, many people used to believe that flying was impossible. But to tell you the truth, it's not, and neither is anything else. There's things that are near impossible, but it's still possible. And honestly, I've come to the conclusion that it's okay. Nothing's going to be perfect. No one's journey is going to be perfect. Because if that was the case, then that's like saying life is perfect. And that is very impossible. That is like the one thing on earth that's impossible, is to have a perfect life, a perfect outcome. And there's going to be bumps in the road no matter who you are, no matter where you go. It's going to be tough, trying, challenging. And if you're not really up for that, then maybe either wait or maybe pick something else. But if you're super passionate about it and willing to stay, then yes, you will make a great pilot. Another question, probably the last one, is what type of characteristics does a pilot need? This is a great one, and this goes along with what I was saying in the beginning. Great communication skills. And to be honest, I did not have great communication skills when I was younger, as well as in my early teen years, and I'm still a teenager. I am turning 20 next year, but still, it's crazy to think about how 2 years ago I struggled with communication. But those skills do develop as time goes on. But I highly recommend some experience with talking to people, communicating with people. So if you get a job of over the phone or a desk or something like that, where but have good communication skills. Second, you got to have motivation, because if you don't have motivation, it won't happen. To be honest, aviation is such a motivational industry, but you as a person also have to have motivation and the drive and the willingness to just focus, keep going. And also, you do have to be, I highly recommend being academically strong in some subjects, I guess. But pull good grades. Make sure you're doing anything in your power to get above a 3.0. 3.0 is great. But if you can get higher, that's even better. Lower GPAs than that doesn't hurt your chance of getting into the aviation industry. But just make it a challenge to you. Because if you can challenge yourself now, you can guaranteed challenge yourself in the future. Also, you must be goal-oriented. You must be able to set goals and set time stamps, aka time management, in order to get there. Because with aviation, a lot of it is flying, a lot of it is ground, studying. You have to be a well-balanced time manager of an individual. Because I found it super hard for those who I've seen it. If you have a hard time managing, it kind of gets a little bit hard, especially when you have like flight test, class test, you have a ground, you have another ground, and then you have another flight, and it's just really all these things back to back, plus you have to fit in study time. It's really, really difficult if you don't really know how to set a schedule. So if you're a little bit younger, if you're considering being a pilot, no matter what age, actually I should say, start setting timestamps and saying, okay, from this time to this time, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm going to get ready for the day. 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., I'm going to study or whatever. And then go to my ground at 12:30, whatever you desire the most. Also, confidence is key in aviation. I guess that's a personality trait. And it does get acquired as you start building flight hours and kind of changing, going on through a program, changing, careers, changing roles, everything, learning. You have to be very open-minded. A pilot has to be open-minded to suggestions, comments, concerns, criticisms, complaints, really any negativity, because, even if people tell you you can't do that, you can't do it. Like, you can't be a pilot. You just have to be open-minded and say, okay, sure. But then you turn around and do it, right? But you also have to be open-minded with information. So, if your instructor says, hey, please work on your landings, you're flaring a little bit too early, so make sure you just correct that and change it, because they're also here to help you as well. And learn from other people. Backseat. I haven't backseated an instrument really, just because instrument is a very procedural task. However, on the seldom occasion that I would in private pilot, I would do it. So, so those are just a few of the characteristics. Really, if you love aviation, if you really want it, then you're going to be successful. In my experience, it's been amazing. It's been so rewarding. So I just wanted to really hop on here this week and answer a few of your guys' questions, as well as answer a few of the questions I was asked on my homework assignments. So hopefully it will help you gauge and understand what aviation is like as a whole. And if you are a pilot in training, please keep going. If you're thinking about being a pilot, please keep going. And if you are a pilot, well, that's awesome. And keep going, get all the rating certificates you can, because it's an awesome industry to be in. And let me tell you what, I have had the best experiences of my life just going to flight training and just being able to be PIC, pilot in command of an aircraft. There's no other feeling in the world like it. And I'm sorry, driving is not the same thing as flying. It doesn't even equate. They're two different things. But I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Now, I am proposing a new idea. I have been thinking about this for a while. But before I end, I want to thank you for staying this long and listening to my voice for this long. But I was going to propose a new idea. And this new idea has to do with kind of a more educational video. I know I love educational videos. These podcasts are pretty educational, I think. I would hope at least. But I just kind of wanted to answer some questions that you guys have, maybe about flying, and actually put it on pen and paper and do a video and show you guys. Now, I'm not a CFI yet, so I can't really teach something, but I can simplify it down enough to where everybody understands it. So, for example, lift. I always struggled with explaining and describing how lift works. So I came up with a simple diagram, and for anyone that has questions about lift, I can explain it pretty well and very simply. So I really wanted to start this new series called Simplified Aviation. I was going to give it like a cool little title, like Simplified 100 LL or something, just for fun. But please let me know if you guys want a little bit more educational videos where they're visual and you can see I'm writing things, because it would help me as well, I think. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you guys have a great week this week, and keep going. But I will see you guys next week.